Howdy, Astro Freaks. It is I, Astro Lunachick, bringing you some more astrology. I'm really pumping it out. You know what I'm saying? I'm like ready for the new year. Yeah, actually, this is usually a hibernating time of year for me, which is unfortunate because Capricorn is like in my 10th house. It's a weird dynamic, but I'm here. I got Mars on my midheaven. That's probably why. Like, ready to get out there. And Mercury retrograde going direct. It'll go back over my midheaven. And so I'm pretty public and visible. And I'm having my solar return this week, you guys. I don't even want to say how many there have been, but just keep it to I've been around the sun a few times. All right. Yeah, she gets around. I've been around the sun. I'm an around the way girl. So, I hope you guys caught my weekly astrology. I was a good girl and I recorded it yesterday and uploaded it today. The weekly astrology for December 31st through January 6th. And yeah, trying to be on top of my game in true Capricorn fashion. So I got a lot of exciting projects that I'm working on right now. And uh, yeah, one of my goals here is I met my goal of having my weekly show, and I'm doing that with consistency. And now I'm gonna talk about asteroids and stars more, and because I know a lot of people are quite fascinated with the topic, as they should be. So I'm gonna bring it out and let you guys see what I'm seeing through my beady little eyes, and we're gonna talk about some asteroids that I've been watching through this. Well, through it really started, I guess, in Sagittarius season, also known as November. Well, late November into December. So when the sun and Mercury were transiting through Sagittarius, and then Mercury went retrograde, stopped in Capricorn, went back into Sagittarius, and then Mars got to the later degrees of Sag. There's a couple of asteroids that we're going to talk about that I've been watching for a while. And for me, they connect to a particular situation that's been going on that has come to my attention recently. And something in celebrity gossip. So I've been hearing a lot of like words on the street about this stuff. And then, of course, I go and look and see what asteroid action is happening, and it all kind of makes sense. So we're going to talk about a little bit about asteroids. Um, yeah, well, asteroids and stars. So let me just leave it at that. So let's jump in. I'm going to share my screen with y'all, and probably going to toggle back and forth between my desktop browser and mm, my iPad, which has my astrology program on it, which I really like this. This is for those of you who are interested. If you look at the screen down here at the bottom, iFemeris, it's an app for iOS and Mac, and it was free when I signed up. but yeah, I have to subscribe now. But I do actually really recommend it because you could actually change these colors. I like the colors. It makes it easy to stand out. And um, what I really like about it is here you can fast forward. So you can actually set it by the second. Like you could just narrow it down to exactly the time that you want. You could skip forward days, months, years, 50 years, whatever. And it's just super easy to use. So I've got it on my phone. I'm addicted to it. It's like crack or meth. I think we're we're in meth. We're in the meth era now. So yeah, crack is whack. So this is where we're at today. And let me make sure this is actually the right time. Yeah, more or less. I opened it. I won't open this up about 10 minutes ago to look at it. So let's just put it right back to the exact time. See how easy this is? Little clock over here. And just set it to exactly where we're at now. And this is just such a great resource. I love it. I love it because I could just, something could happen in the moment. I could just jump right to the chart and say, okay, what the hell is going on? So, like at that moment, like right at that moment. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't excite you, but I'm a strange person. But anyway, so I always go to, it's interesting to know what sign is rising on the horizon. In terms of the sky, if you were looking at it, this is the east where the sun comes up and it goes boop, 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 like this. So the sun is about here, like, I don't know, roughly a 45-degree angle at about, right now, this time where we are. It's kind of cool because at night also, if you see a planet in the sky, and often, people like to take pictures. I like to take pictures of the moon when it is conjunct Jupiter because Jupiter is very bright and shiny in the sky. So it's really easy to see. Or Venus, when Venus is visible, which she is right now. She's a morning star, which means she rises before the sun, which makes her in her solar feminine phase. She's warrior Venus. She's Venus Luciferi or Lucifero. I forgot. I don't speak Italian. No parlo Italiano. All right, so this is where we're at right now. Down here is the moon. It's on the cusp of the fourth and fifth house. It's moving this way. So, this wheel turns clockwise. So, moon at 3 degrees of Virgo, making a square to Venus at 2 to 3 degrees of Sag, and the moon making an opposition to Saturn. So, this can be interpreted a few different ways. The moon is our emotions. It's also our astral body, and the moon does represent, in a sense, a part of our physical vitality. I'd like to look at it as, because the sun also does represent our physical vitality. But I like to look at the moon as more of the field around us, you know, um, the layers of our subtle bodies, whether, you're talking about the mental body, the emotional body, the causal, the auric field, the aura. So let's, group it into a catch-all term of the aura. It's the energy that extends outward from the body. The moon also in a mundane chart, a mundane meaning it's external worldly stuff. It's not a birth chart. It's more of an event chart. So right now, I'm looking at a mundane chart, which is just a snapshot of where we're at in the cosmos. Know what I'm saying? So the moon also represents like the collective mood. It's what we're all sort of vibing on. So it's very interesting, lunar astrology. And you'll notice that if the moon is in your sign, it's usually it puts a spotlight on you. You feel comfortable in its energy. People respond to you, generally speaking, pretty well because everyone's vibing on your level. Um, Moon in Virgo, well, it can be a little particular and nitpicky. Let's just say that Virgo is a perfectionistic sign. It is interested in purification. It concerns itself with the details, the analytics. Virgo represents the systems and um, how should we put it? It's like society's regulations and, like governmental codes, stuff like that. I also look at Virgo as um, when it comes to the dynamics of victim perpetrator and like uh, uh how could I put this? Um, Scapegoating, projection, codependency. I put Virgo and Pisces all into that sort of archetypal basket for the patterns that I see um, for people, when they're in general, but like for birth charts, stuff like that. And it's something I've observed, something that I have personally experienced, and um, in a general sense, in a theme, archetypal mythology. It does tie in a lot to do with religion and the concept of sin and sacrifice, purification of the soul. Pisces is, the Piscean age, Christianity, but not just Christianity. I would put it under all of the Abrahamic religions, which, we have to include Islam and Judaism. So we're looking at that. Very interesting. The moon is, like I said, in Virgo. It's opposite to Saturn. The opposition is a polarity. So this could be we ourselves going back and forth between one polarity to the other, um, maybe having a little bit of resistance or insecurity, or maybe looking at our boundaries, our limitations. Saturn is considered a very karmic planet in the in the sense that Saturn itself represents kind of cause and effect, represents authority. So on an earthly level, Saturn will be the authority, let's say, within the family. And then authority structure, let's say, at school or work or um, uh, legal, law enforcement, government, and then higher authority like natural law, you know, divine kind of mechanics, that kind of thing. So Saturn in Pisces is helping, I think, to redefine our connection with the non-physical, because that's Pisces. Pisces is also the collective unconscious. And so, interestingly, if the moon is the collective conscious on any given day, then Saturn in Pisces is the collective unconscious, right? And Saturn also, okay, so Saturn is Satan, and Satan is the adversary. And um, so Saturn in its function in astrology represents the obstacles that we come up against, the tests, the difficulties. So, like Saturn, I mean, Satan in, biblical terms is looked at as um, the adversary, the tempter, the one who puts, like, let's say, Jesus through the test, right? So it does represent things that we learn and lessons of cause and effect, and um, it helps build character, integrity. It is about our morals and values, and so it kind of acts like a sort of a governor, if you will, not in the sense of politics, but in the sense of, um, I don't know, maybe is that something that has to do with a car, right? A governor that keeps you from going too fast, that restricts your speed. So you can think of Saturn that way, because Saturn will slow you down. Saturn and Capricorn. Saturn is time. Another name for Saturn was Kronos, the god Kronos I think it was in Greek mythology. So Kronos represents authority, power, you know, um, that kind of thing. So anyway, in a sense, you can look at it as the uh, the path we take to discover our own power and authority. Because what happens if you break the law? Then someone has to come in and restrict you and punish. There are repercussions, right? But I always think of it in terms of, if you govern yourself, then you don't need to be governed, right? If you are a self-determining, sovereign being, and you've learned your lessons and you're mature and you have integrity, right? Um, then nobody has to step in and tell you, like, what to do. Anyway, so in this sense, it's interesting, because there could be a lot of self-reflection. Virgo can tend to be very self-critical. And, Pisces, if Virgo is about criticism and judgment, then Pisces is about forgiveness and unconditional, love. So, so Saturn is maybe looking at it in terms of, maybe we can not be so hard on ourselves. And making a square here to Venus, right? It's almost like we need to go through a little self-check or test or moment of doubt, insecurity, perhaps, because it's our sort of our conscience saying, like, you know, um, are we everything we want to be? Like, are is it our standards that are too high? Are we judging ourselves or others too harshly? And maybe we need to kind of take a higher perspective, which is Sagittarius here, Venus and Sag. Wants to learn, it wants to explore, but there's like a, okay, you know, before you go out to play, did you make your bed? Did you do the dishes? Needing to check things off, or dealing with a little insecurity. But I promised you some asteroids, so we're gonna hop on over to that. Let's see. I'm gonna open up my asteroid page, and I also want to make sure that you can see it. So I'm going to turn off this screen sharing. I hope everybody is having a really wonderful holiday season. It's been busy but quiet at the same time. Like I'm busy doing stuff, but it's not holiday related. I didn't even put up a Christmas tree. Like I'm not really just don't find myself being interested in that stuff anymore. I like I said, it's kind of a weird time for me because I feel like just hibernating, but at the same time, there's such an opportunity for me to be productive because I always have that like midheaven and 10th house transits every year. And every year I'm just like, oh God, I just want to crawl in a hole. Huh. Anyway, so I believe we're sharing screen now. Let me just make sure. Yeah, it says I am. All right, I'm just gonna go with it. Hopefully I am. And if I'm not, then I'll figure that out and just know that it's a work in progress. If you want to follow along and go check these things out later, I'm I'm working from a site called Serenu, SERENNU.com. And there is a subscription that is nice to have because there's different charts. There's lots of different things that you could do with this site. Plus, you can plug in additional asteroids with the free version. Still pretty good. You only get to add 10 additional asteroids, but oh my God, I mean, there's so many asteroids already on here. So let's look at where we are right now. Yeah, Virgo. The moon in Virgo is conjunct Aura. Damn, you guys, what was I just talking about? So this is like double emphasis. The moon already is the planet that is associated with our subtle bodies, which we could just lump under the heading of our aura, our energy field, right? Or, in general terms, aura is like giving off like a certain vibe, right? Um, so the moon conjunct aura and Isis-transpluto, which is not an asteroid. It's a trans-Plutonian body, but you can think of the archetype of Isis, right? So Isis is like she's the counterpart to Osiris, and she does bring all his pieces back to resurrect him. So in terms of the feminine goddess archetype, Isis and Osiris together kind of represent, you know, resurrection, right? The um, the concept of bringing renewal and new life. So that's an interesting thing. So the moon, it goes about 1 degree every 2 hours. So over the next couple of hours, it's going to conjunct Isis and then asteroid Salvia and Hecate. So when I see Salvia, I think, Salvia is like the what would you call it? The botanical term for sage, right? It's sage is in the salvia. family. You also have Salvia divinorum, right, for my psychonauts. And salvia also, etymologically, I think savior, salvation. So that's the way you can look at these asteroids. And then, whatever it means to you. I mean, I think we only really connect to these asteroids if we can look at something in the physical world that our, conscious mind can connect to say, oh, yes, I understand this archetype through this physical thing that's playing out. Um, I think that helps us to connect to the asteroids if we can look at them that way, because they are sometimes literal. Like sometimes the literal word and the name, it could be just very literal, the word itself. And then it could be the mythological story, and reading and studying a little bit about the myths after which these characters are, the gods and goddesses are named for. Those are allegorical stories. Although some people think that gods really did walk the earth at one time. And if our earth was not as dense and physical millions of years ago, or who knows how long, but at one time in other epics, uh, these characters could have been real, right? And what is left but the stories that remain and the archetypal stories that we ourselves are living out, right? Um, think of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, you know. Um, the archetypes and the mythology tell us a story about ourselves and things that we go through in a human experience too. So they are us. So then right after Salvia, we have at 7 to 8 degrees of Virgo. It is retrograde, by the way. It is Hecate. Many of you know Hecate, so I won't go into that. And that is pretty much it for the day, because I think by tomorrow we're looking at the moon in Virgo in the mid degrees, about like we'll be getting into the moon conjunct Orcus on Apophis and then Juno. So if I can, I'll do a video tomorrow to talk about those things. But let's just look at where we're at today. So today, Venus, as I was saying, conjunct Hidalgo on one side, and in a few days, because she's doing about a degree a day. So in, I don't know, maybe 5 days or so, she'll conjunct Hopi and Apophis. Very interesting. So if you have any connection to, Native American stories and tribes, if that's a thing for you, look into the Hopi. I'm not that familiar with them, but I did do a little bit of research at one time, and I think what stuck with me was perhaps the story or the theme of Hopi might relate to displaced groups of people, which, I mean, that's a Native American thing anyway. And I don't actually think that there's any other asteroids that I'm aware of that are named after a Native American tribe. But if this is something that you connect with, definitely look into it and see if it aligns with your chart in any way, because there will be a transit. What usually happens is when when a transiting planet conjuncts an asteroid, we see that archetype more clearly. Also, when an asteroid is transiting one of our natal planets, we'll see that archetype play out. It's very interesting. So Apophis is an Egyptian god, and it is kind of like their Satan in Egyptian mythology. It's the destroyer. We also have an asteroid. Um, I mean, yes, this is the asteroid named Apophis, but we often see from time to time in like science articles talk about Apophis because it's one of those near Earth objects that could potentially come close to hitting the Earth. So it's I do look at this asteroid as one of the themes of, like global cataclysm by through some, comet or asteroid hitting the Earth, that kind of theme. Because it's happened, I'm sure, before in our consciousness back, it's probably a memory, a genetic memory, maybe a soul memory. I don't know. But for some reason, every once in a while, when, the fear factor isn't amped up quite high enough, they pull out, you know, planet, well, they don't do Planet X, but that's more of like the underground conspiratorial. But Apophis is along the lines of, the Planet X coming um to like wipe us out. Anyway, um, so that's interesting, but that's Venus. I don't know. Yes, it will conjunct to Apophis later in a. I'm not can't fast forward it right now, but I'm gonna say that later it or mid-month January, look for some kind of a theme of, oh my God, we're all gonna die because an asteroid's gonna hit the Earth. The interesting thing about this section of the zodiac, um, and perhaps I'll look at the stars in a bit, but we're doing asteroids right now. The stars stay fixed. Remember, asteroids and planets move, stars stay fixed. What's interesting about some of the stars in late Scorpio through parts of Sagittarius is there's a constellation called Draco. And the thing about Draco is the dragon. And in ancient astrology, uh, this constellation and its stars were associated with a time when a comet passed by the earth and scattered poison. So there are a few stars and constellations that I do look at for um, events that affect, you know, affect us on a global scale. Uh, and this is one of them. The other one is Perseus. And Perseus, there's I forget which star it is exactly. But anyway, these stars have been known from ancient times to be associated with transits, or, when they say the star is associated with a time where cataclysms happened, that means that there were also major planetary transits happening. For the ancients, it was probably, I'm gonna guess, probably eclipses because they didn't have the outer planets they were watching, and they really looked to the lunar cycle and the uh, the eclipse cycles. So anyway, my theory is that, and what I've seen, um, is that when we're having transits through this part of the sky, it's like they're I don't want to say they. Um, the ancient memory of cataclysms, it's like a wound that gets triggered. So it starts to, I think, surface from the collective shadow. Uh, and that's why we get these stories of uh, crazy things, potentially going to happen because it's like sort of a projection of that wound that's already there because it happened around this time of year, if that makes sense. So anyway, what else do we have in Sagittarius? Because it's important to look at. I did look at Virgo. That's over the next like couple of days, and the moon moves very quickly. But we do have Venus going through Sag, so we could talk about some of those asteroids. Um, okay, we have asteroid Child at 15 degrees of Sagittarius, Ceres, which is the mother archetype. Osiris, we were just talking about Isis at 19 degrees of Sag, and Osiris is moving to close in on Mercury, so they will conjunct probably over the next day or so. When Mercury stations, it'll be stationed, maybe not exact, but let's look at it. The hell. Mercury is stationing on the 1st anyway, so the 1st of January at 22 degrees of Sagittarius. And I think Mercury's going to station conjunct Osiris, which will make it very interesting because Venus will be squaring to Isis. We just talked about Isis in Virgo. And so, the feminine archetype, Venus being in her warrior phase of Morning Star, squaring to Isis, that would be, if, you look at it in terms of like divine feminine, sort of a call to arms, call to battle, spiritual battle, of course. It's the only kind that I condone. Um, where was I? So Sagittarius, Mercury, pretty close. I mean, here's the speed over here. I think in the coming days, Mercury stations, and then it's still going very slow. See, it's at a negative speed. This is a speed here. This is declination, in case you were wondering. So let's call it. I mean, it's close enough for rock and roll, right? At 20 degrees of Sagittarius, 20 to 21. Mercury at 22. Osiris will catch up. So we're talking about the masculine and feminine archetype. We're talking about resurrection. There's a message here from Osiris, who is working with Isis as she reconstructs him. So, yes, it does have to do with, male and female, but it also has to do with our own masculine and feminine. Masculine being our external world, the physical, and the feminine being the internal, intuitive, passive, yang energy, and masculine being the yang. Did I say? No, I meant feminine yin and the um, masculine yang. So there is some kind of a resurrection here. And what I think, okay, is also interesting, and I started to mention this in the beginning. These asteroids I've been watching all through the Mercury retrograde when Mercury went into its shadow, shadow being the part of the degree of the zodiac that it reverts to. It reverses, Mercury reverses and stations and then starts to go direct. That's the 22-degree mark. And during the shadow, I've been watching these asteroids. Radiocommunicata Kassandra, very interesting. Now, you can look at this as radio communications, right? Or any kind of verbal broadcasting. Um, from the very, I mean, if you looked at it historically, I think it would be very interesting, like the first radio broadcast. But what does radio actually mean to us today, right? Radio communication is not radio, it's not analog, it's not, um, you know, think of all of the different waves and bands of communication. Now everything is digital. I think it all follows under the same heading. Anything to do with verbal communication, I look at it as verbal, but radio in the sense that, we have radio waves, but we also have waves of frequency in our voice as we communicate. So there is layers of communication, many ways we can look at this, right? So I'm talking to you now and you're hearing me and you consciously hear the words that I'm saying, but I am saying other things that you're not consciously picking up, but they're there, right? So think about this in many different perspectives when you look at radio communicata. Very interesting. I've been watching this one for a while. I started watching it when it was in the early degrees of Scorpio, and then I realized that my natal asteroid radio communicata was at pretty much at that degree, and then we were having a solar eclipse on that degree in Scorpio. Very, very interesting. And I started I started doing a show on an internet radio station. And whatever, my YouTube channel is my internet radio station. So you get what I'm saying? Like, we can look at this in very broad terms. Also, now Cassandra in mythology, she was a prophetess and she was cursed to um not be believed. Like she would prophesy, but no one would listen to her. No one would believe her. And so this indicates the concept of, you know, um, people ringing the warning bell and bringing forward prophecy, not necessarily in the religious sense, but trying to warn people, but, feeling like you're not being heard. I actually have this um, asteroid conjunct my moon, my moon in Aquarius. So, it's like, um, yeah, I've kind of felt that way since I was a kid. Like, you know, I would tell my parents things like, you know, this isn't good, you know, and this is why, and blah, blah, blah. And they didn't want to hear it because anyway, they didn't want to hear it. But I was right, you know? So, um, I keep my visions to myself now. And I only share them with people who get it and want to hear it. And, whatever. Consider the source. It's just my feeling of what I think could potentially happen here. But it's interesting that throughout the Mercury retrograde and the transits through Sagittarius, there's also been a lot of fear porn in the sense of what I see coming out on the internet and like kind of the usual suspects if you sort of play along and watch the sort of conspiratorial side of things like I do, the fringes, if you hang out on the fringes. Um, this is like, oh, Carrie Cassidy, really? Oh my God, didn't we figure out who she was? No, she's got a new crop of people to grift. Anyway, but here's the other thing that I found very, very interesting. So as I'm watching this, I'm also watching the Cassie P. Diddy case, right? This is part of my true crime addiction. And um yeah, I mean the rumors in the back alleys and the word on the street has really like become sort of mainstream when it comes to P. Diddy. And I did not know that he and Cassie were together. I liked her music, and then she kind of went away, but all makes sense now. So anyway, she files this civil suit, and he settles like within 24 hours. Uh, so I've been listening to the gossip and everything, and um, early on after they settled, I did hear that she was going to do an interview, but we haven't seen that yet. So I'm wondering what's going on with that because Radiocommunicata and Kassandra, that's my point. Cassie, Cassandra, she spells it with a C. This is a K, but same thing. So you see how the asteroids work? It could be, we could look at the theme of the mythology, or it could be a literal name. And so when I realized that these two were traveling together, she's a little bit further ahead right now. And Mars was traveling with them too. I mean, Mars was making for a lot of like attacks, like provocation, and it looked a little dicey there. So she could have already done the interview and it just hasn't aired yet. And or she could be feeling threatened, possibly, or waiting for that to blow over. I felt like while Mars was there, it would be dangerous for her to put that out, you know. Um, her life, you know, could definitely was, I would doubt it. Like if, anyway, if she received threats. But as Mercury goes direct and starts to gain some speed, um, eventually it will catch up. We're not going to look at that right now. We're going to leave that for another episode. What else do we have here? Asteroid Koronis. Koronis conjunct Mars. So Mars, the planet of Mars represents aggression, attacks, war, fire, heat, explosions, fever, pointy objects, most notably of metal, and weapons of war. And Koronis, well, Koronis means crown, and corona is a halo around the sun, right? Coronal mass ejections. So, yeah, there's that. I don't know if we've had any recent solar flares, but I think it's interesting. And there's another thing that is linked to Koronis that I think you could just extrapolate off of that. So we would look at that as the weaponization or a new start, a new iteration, fill in the blank and read between the lines. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Anyway, I think that while the sun was going through Sagittarius, I was watching these asteroids. They all look very interesting. We had asteroid going through there. Psyche just went into Capricorn, but it was in Sagittarius and conjuncted uh, Mercury at one time, and both of those were squaring to Neptune. Neptune is illusion, delusion, lies, denial, that kind of thing. And so there was a lot going on collectively with the psyche and the sun. I think the sun and psyche last week were conjunct at the last few degrees of Sag. So, you know, the galactic center, as you can see here at 27 degrees of Sagittarius, is I didn't mention Varda, just so you know. I am aware of Varda, and Varda is it's a the fairy queen from in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So she's at 27 to 28 degrees of Sagittarius, and her counterpart is Manwë. Where is Manwë? I think Manwë is in Aries. They were square for a long time. So you can look at them as sort of Isis, Osiris, twin flame. Let's say twin flame, but divine masculine, divine feminine, the counterparts. Yeah, Manwë is at 1 degree, 0 to 1 degree of Aries, and she is squaring him by a few degrees. One of the things that stuck out in my mind about these two is that it's the concept of being stronger together. Like, I think they're superpowers. They each have their superpowers. And together, when they are together, when they work together, masculine and feminine, it's this idea of they are stronger together than they are separate. And the other thing that stuck out to me was they're telepathic, which I think is fucking awesome. Anyway, so there's that. Um, so, with Koronis, we could look at Koronis also as the crown chakra, right? And Mars perhaps activating it. But back to the galactic center, which is considered to be the center of our galaxy and where basically everything emanated from, right? Whatever it is, the Big Bang. If you're Gnostic, it's the pleroma, right, of the Aeon Sophia that, uh, you know, um, is basically like the birth of all life, how she birthed the universe, right? Panspermia or whatever. But anyway, it's the source of very strong emanations that, um, according to Vedic traditions, if you understand the Kali Yuga, there are, it has to do with our proximity to the galactic center in terms of the energy that we receive, the photonic light particles, I guess, or maybe that comes from the sun. So maybe it's our sun being affected by galactic center and then us being affected in turn, or however it goes. Um, During like the quote dark ages and you know times when we are not getting that photonic light, not receiving the emanations from galactic center. It's a very dark time. And then when we, as our solar system and, you know, obviously the Earth, it has more access to and is being bombarded with more energy from the galactic center, that's when we have like the raising of consciousness. It's what I believe is called ascension, the ascension cycle. It's, more light means more consciousness, more wisdom, more awareness of the divine for humans. So we cannot be deceived. It's like a third eye activation where you start to see everything for what it really is. So the veil is thinner and thinner and thinner until more and more of the population of humanity can see what's really going on. And I think that's really what's going on right now. The balance of power is shifting on the earth. So I'm going to say present company excluded, many, 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 the majority of people on this planet do not know what's really going on. And even those of us who think we do, we only have scratched the surface, I have a feeling. So anyway, what I have noticed as planets go through this section of the zodiac and connect with the galactic center, um, the sun does it every year, Mercury, Venus, the moon does it once a month. Every time planets, I theorize, this is my hypothesis, and what I've observed is that when planets transit the galactic center, they get a purification or an upgrade. So, it's like an update for your software, for your app. The planets get them. Now, the larger planets that move slower, like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, um, that is more of those are generational planets, and those are planets that affect society as a whole. Definitely if that planet, if the outer planets are making aspect to one of our planets, then that would be a very transformational time for us. But what I noticed over many years, um, just watching and feeling like, wow, the planets evolve and their influence changes just like we do. We evolve with our transits. We have our progress chart. We don't stay static. And I felt like the planets are getting upgrades every time they go over the galactic center because we're becoming more aware of how they're functioning. More is being revealed to us. So I think of that as a very interesting concept. So, when Mercury goes over the galactic center every year, it's like we're able to access with our conscious mind and our left brain more truth, more information. We're seeing things more clearly every time we have a Mercury alignment with galactic center. But this year we had, well, we get two, we got one, two, three of them because of the Mercury retrograde. So consider this to be a revelation or a play in three acts because Mercury first connected to the galactic center when it was going direct. Then it stationed at 7 degrees, 6 degrees, whatever it was, of Capricorn, went backwards, passed over the galactic center at 25 degrees. Wait, I'm sorry, 27 degrees, um, going retrograde. Now it's back at 22 degrees. It'll station and go direct and go back over galactic center one more time. And all the while, it conjuncted the sun, but that was at like 0 degrees of Capricorn, but still close to galactic center. It conjuncted with Mars, made a conjunction with Mars in there. So Mars going over galactic center, that happens every 2 years. So the masculine principles getting upgraded, our will, our courage, our bravery, right? Our ability to stand up and defend ourselves, getting an upgrade, right? Along with our mental like mind and processing and information, more information coming in so that we can act accordingly. Uh, what else? So somewhere in there, Radiocommunicata and Kassandra is very interesting. The other thing that I also noticed is that um a lot of warnings, right? Prophecies and warnings, and with a Christian bent, um, of God's judgment, of things happening. And they're all really trying to like game the political situation and try to like uh, predict when things are going to happen. It's not going well. So, in a sense, I think part of the awakening and the revelation that we're getting during this time with Mercury and Mars squaring to Neptune is that we need to wake up to who's really got the real information and who is sounding the alarm bell out of fear, or, if it's rooted in some kind of like religious delusion, uh, using the Bible as a playbook, because I don't think that it's meant to be taken literal like that. Like, to me, those things are alchemical and archetypal, and it's talking about the soul and maybe something that happened at one time, and maybe a cycle that does repeat. But I'm really wary of anybody at all who like is coming out with that kind of stuff. It used to be interesting for me. I used to be interested in listening to that because not that I believed what they were saying, but I I don't know. To me, it's kind of like a sociological study. Like I like to study groups of people and what they're saying, what they think, their ideologies, their beliefs, and why they might think that way, believe that way. And so also, the things that I observed is a lot of fear and a lot of I mean, there's just I guess there is this belief structure of, somebody's coming to save us, and God's judgment. We're right, the other person is wrong. They're going to be. I see that in like New Age spirituality also. Like there's certain tarot readers that I notice have this sort of like you're the chosen one, and you're divine, feminine, and she's the karmic, blah blah blah. I mean, I get it. I'm not like trying to put it down. I just it's just I'm more of an on the scenes, on the sidelines observer to this stuff. Because I find it fascinating. But a lot of this, I think we're going to see sort of replayed as Mercury goes direct. I don't know. The other thing is maybe people were warning about radio communications, and that would include internet and any kind of broadcasts. Um, it's either broadcasts warning about something or uh, or something happens with the radio broadcasts. Because I did see something on Twitter where somewhere in Virginia, but very close to DC, where this like emergency broadcast warning system went off at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was very close to government buildings. It wasn't really in a residential area necessarily, and somebody filmed it. And I thought to myself, this is Mercury retrograde conjunct Radiocommunicata. Mercury retrograde brings glitches. So I feel like this was not meant to happen. So it could be things go wrong, things go wonky with some kind of radio communications broadcasts. Things get said that weren't meant to be revealed. That's the kind of thing that happens with Mercury retrograde. And Mercury retrograde, Mercury goes direct tomorrow. So, it, the influence when the planet stations to go direct or retrograde, it's usually most intense on that day or a day before or a day after. So we're in that window where the things that you hear could be true, but you're not meant to hear them, but they accidentally get put out there. Hot mic situations, 100%. Cassandra, hmm. Well, I just think that this is sort of a test of our discernment. And I've learned after listening to certain things for a long period of time where you don't know if it's true or not. I it's on my bullshit detector. So it's a frequency and I've learned to detect it. So, I think that this Mercury retrograde season has been a very interesting BS detector um, upgrade, let's say. Recalibrating, because people have been warning about things. What happens when they don't happen? Then that person loses credibility. Some of these people are well-meaning people, and others are there because they're on the payroll and that's their job to make sure that certain information doesn't get out and to distract with other information. It's called a psyop. Okay. Uh, Speaking of which, the super soldiers are making their rounds again. I tweeted this out. It should be renamed instead of the SSP, the Super Soldier Program, it should be the SLP, the Super LARPers Program, because again, there can be some truth to these things, but there are certain people that are put out there so they can gatekeep information. You cannot believe everything. 2024 is going to be a huge year when it comes to like space aliens and disclosure shit. But you better calibrate your BS detector right now. And also, while you're at it, go run over and subscribe to Cliff High because he's he is the end result, like the end game. He's pegged it, and now we're gonna have to like sort of reverse engineer it. Like, how did we get to that point? But we're starting it like right now. Um, a lot of what he talks about in terms of, let's say, the um, what do you call them? Anunnaki, the Elohim, the Nephilim in the Bible, and that kind of thing. I've understood that for a long time. Um, that was part of my religious deconstruction. So it all makes sense to me. But when I see Elohim trending on Twitter for like 3 days, that's when you know we've hit a tipping point. All right, so back to the crown chakra and Mars. Interesting, isn't it? Are we still following along on the screen sharing? What else we got going on? Psyche, asteroid Psyche is at 2 to 3 degrees of Capricorn and is about to conjunct Ixion. I promised we were going to talk about Ixion. So let me see if I can actually pull up some mythology on Ixion. Ixion's an interesting one. It's one of my favorite asteroids. It moves very slow. It's got a very interesting um the story in mythology is very interesting. So let me oops. Trying to do two things at once. Ixion, where are you? All right. So I'm looking at takeastrology.com, asteroids and astrology. This is a good resource if you're interested in looking into that. So Ixion, father of the centaurs, in a positive sense, understands karmic wheel, gives and uses a second chance, discerning, negatively, lustful, inconsiderate, inclined to repeat errors, learns nothing from experience, neutral, second chances, efforts, reset buttons, study of weather and watching clouds. Not really sure about that. Lust, coveting another's mate. So basically, I want to pull this up because I want to be accurate on the story because it's an important one and we're having some interesting transits. Okay. So Ixion was a king by Zeus's command was pinned to a fiery wheel. That was the wheel of Tartarus. That revolved unceasingly through the underworld as a punishment for his alleged seduction of Hera. Okay, Hera and Zeus, God, God, you know, his wife, Queen Hera. Um, so Hera is also Juno. So Juno is Roman, Hera is Greek, Zeus is Jupiter, also Apollo. So Ixion was a king. He tried to seduce Hera, Zeus's wife. So he gets punished by being put on the torture wheel and was condemned to spin on the wheel for all of eternity. It represents karma, represents, you know, reincarnation and the concept of karma of cause and effect and the idea of what you do in one life follows you into the next, that kind of thing. Um, but it also is connected to the theme of taking something that doesn't belong to you. And Ixion was the guest of Zeus and, you know, guest in his home. And he goes and tries to like seduce his wife. So it's also this concept of not having respect for your host, for the person who is helping you. Yeah, you know, you're in their home, taking them for granted, but also it is about you know, cheating and going after somebody that doesn't belong to you. And so, but also, the asteroid does give a connotation of getting a second chance, having a reset. So let's look at it in those terms also, um, because how do we get off the karmic wheel or the karmic cycle, but by breaking the karma? And how do we do that? We learn what our realize, what it the karma and is meant to, what the lesson is, the karmic lesson. We learn it, we get it. We don't have to repeat it, right? So being given a second chance. And interesting that we have Psyche and Ixion together. Um, the sun was conjunct Ixion round about December 26th. So we can look at that date as part of our quote reset. We can look at this Mercury retrograde time period, the very end of the year, as part of our quote reset. Some of you will understand that in a different context, the global reset. So if that's the way you're looking at it, then that's the way you should hear this, that there are 3 steps and phases at this point in time that will connect to that. And that is when you're talking about the Mercury retrograde. So 4 degrees of Capricorn, Mercury retrograde started December 15th, no, 13th. So starting with the new moon on the 12th, Mercury goes retrograde on the 13th. These dates are important. The sun was at 22 degrees of Sagittarius, which is the shadow period, the degree of the shadow of Mercury retrograde, which tells you this time period is important. And then Mercury would have been conjunct Ixion the 19th and 20th. Now, we can include another theme of Ixion is Ixion was considered to be like the first murder. Like he's connected to like the first murder. All right. So I've always kind of looked at this asteroid Ixion as part of a theme of being murder. And especially having to do with love triangles, husband, wife, lover, that kind of thing. And um, around mid-December, I was picking up on some stories and possibilities. So I don't know that it was happening at that time, but some of the things I was seeing were things that came up, stories that came up from the past, including P.Diddy, because it is rumored that there is like more than a few people like associated with him that have suspicious passings, allegedly, including um his ex, Kim Porter. So as I was seeing the connections with Mercury retrograde things come up from the past, and Ixion having a lot to do with uh uh, let's just say some dirty deeds. I found that very interesting. So That's a whole rabbit hole. I'm gonna do a video on Didio. So stay tuned for that. Diddy has his own asteroid too. If I remember, I'm gonna look at that today. But anyway, so I've been seeing these connections. So, I'm like letting you guys know what these what patterns I'm seeing with these asteroids. What else we have going on? Sun. Well, close enough. Sun in a few days will be hitting Pythia. Pythia is the Pythian Oracle, also known as the Oracle of Delphi. So this has to do with prophecy. Um, the Pythians, the Pythons, the Pythian Society. That is another secret society. When I used to live down in New York City, I found the old Pythian temple somewhere on the Upper West Side. That was interesting. I think I have a picture of it somewhere. And I did a little research and I don't know, it's not clear. There wasn't a whole lot of information on the internet. I would have had to go to the library. But anyway, um, so, one can only surmise that a secret society or a fraternal brotherhood, whatever. I don't think it was fraternal, actually. I think this was including women. But I would think that it would be centered around and focused on the Oracle of Delphi in some way, like oracles and prophecies and divination. So that's what Pythia is associated with. All right, now connecting all the way around, we started off with Virgo moon opposing Saturn, squaring to Venus, and somehow we got sidetracked, but we end up here at Saturn in Pisces at 3 degrees, conjunct Bandersnatch. So Bandersnatch, that's also an interesting asteroid that I have looked at. Now, if you've watched the series, The Black Mirror, there's an episode called Bandersnatch, and it's involves um like a video game developer, uh and I have to go and look that up exactly, but you may be familiar with it. If not, go check it out because it does also correlate with where Bandersnatch originally came from, which was um, Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll and The Hunting of the Snark. So the Bandersnatch is like a boogeyman. It's a monster. It has, like really sharp teeth and a long neck. And somewhere I have the drawing of it, and it just looks ferocious. So let's see. It says here, through the looking glass implies that Bandersnatches may be found in the world behind the looking glass, aka the astral, non-physical, other dimensions, whatever, yada yada. And in The Hunting of the Snark, a Bandersnatch is found by a party of adventurers after crossing an ocean. What does the ocean imply? The unconscious, right? Bandersnatches have appeared in various adaptations of Carroll's works. They also have been used in other authors' works and in other media. So, the Black Mirror episode, I want to say, you know, the the bad character or whatever from the video game, maybe like It's really about like the subconscious bleeding into the conscious, and the Bandersnatch is, like a boogeyman, the specter, the not a ghost, but it's like the embodiment of all of our fears. And is it real? Is it real or is it unconscious? And then we make it conscious and it becomes real. So think of that in terms of how that is influencing Saturn, which is our fears, right? And that which is opposing us, restricting us. And um, from a religious sense, it is, the Satan, but bleeding into our conscious reality, becoming physical. Because that's what Saturn is. Um, Saturn is the planet associated in alchemy with crystallization. So if you think of the black cube and the concept of boxing something in, that's the concept of us being trapped as consciousness into a physical container here on Earth, right? So Saturn makes things physical and real. So this is interesting, isn't it? I wonder what we'll hear about in terms of that. So anyway, I think that's all I really want to cover today in terms of the asteroids. And you could see why in my weekly, if I talk about the asteroids, I'm just going to be doing a 5-hour marathon, and nobody wants to listen to that. As it is, I'm just surprised that anyone will listen to an hour and a half of of whatever I have to say, but that's cool. I'm glad you're here. Anyway, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I hope that turned out okay. I think that was sharing my browser um, for the website, serenu.com. You should check it out. It is really cool. It's very interesting to plug your own birth information there and look to see what asteroids might be conjunct your planets or your ascendant or your midheaven. It'll tell you a lot about what was going on and help you to understand some things. Anyway, so I hope you all enjoyed that little trip around the asteroid belt. And I'll be doing more of this in the future, as long as people want to hear it. I'll be talking about it, but let me know in the comments wherever you're listening to this, and it could be on YouTube, it could be on Spotify, it could be on Rumble, it could be, I don't know, telepathically. But let me know in the comments if there's any questions that you have, anything you want me to clarify, anything that you're interested in, you're curious about in terms of the asteroids, or if you're wondering if there's an asteroid named after a certain thing, I'll look it up for you. Ask me anything. Ask me anything. So, yeah, that's it. That's it for today. All right. Thank you for joining me. And as always, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Rumble, Substack, astrolunatic.substack.com. Subscribe to the newsletter. Look for my link for Gilded, the information box down below on the YouTube channel videos. You can find a link to invite you to join the Gilded chat channel. So that being said, thank you. I love you all. Mwah. Until next time. Ciao for now.